Hello everyone, just a quick disclaimer before we get started. I don't claim that my builds are the best in the game, and I'm sure there are better ways to optimize some of them, but be aware that I do tend to get my builds at least endgame viable. This includes things like arbitration, steel path, eidolon hunts, etc. Now that this is out of the way, these timestamps have been left here and in the description for your convenience. Feel free to skip around, but I'll start with the basics first just in case people don't know how to play this frame. So starting with the stats, so armor is 150 for prime, 125 for non-prime, so you're looking at a 25-point increase going to the prime. In terms of damage reduction, this is 33.3% damage reduction and 29.4% respectively. For energy, you're looking at a base of 165 for prime, 150 for non-prime. A 15-point increase puts you at 247 and 225 at max respectively. For health, you're looking at 125 for prime, 100 for non-prime. This puts you at 375 and 300 at max respectively. For shield, you're looking at 100 for both. This puts you at 300 at max. For sprint speed, you're looking at 1.15 for each, which is pretty solid. It's pretty snappy. The difference between the two really isn't that great, but of course if you want the best possible stats, the prime is the way to go. Normal Equinox is found from farming the boss on Uranus, and Equinox Prime is vaulted at the time of this video creation, so you'll need to dust off some old relics or pay someone for it. So moving on to abilities, starting with the passive. So 10% of health orbs are converted into energy, and 10% of energy orbs are converted into health. So basically, if I pick up 25 health, it converts into 2.5 energy. And the same goes for energy. If I pick up 25 energy, it converts into 2.5 health. It's not great by itself, but if you use something like Equilibrium, it does stack its effects. Before we get into the abilities itself, it's worth mentioning that Equinox is both a male and female. So day form, the male, has an offensive focus, while the night form, the female, has a defensive and healing style. So with that out of the way, going into the first ability, Metamorphosis. Switch forms, temporarily gaining bonus shields and armor in night form, or bonus damage and speed in day form. So this buff obviously lasts a limited amount of time. Duration affects the buff duration, of course, and strength affects everything else. This pretty much comes down to utility, acting as a quick way to get between the forms and mission. If this ability gets replaced using Helminth, you can change your emissive color to determine what form you spawn in as in a mission. Darker colors making you spawn in as night form, and brighter colors making you spawn in as day form. Moving on to the second ability, Rest and Rage. In night form, targets are put to sleep. In day form, targets become more vulnerable to damage. So this is two abilities in one. Depending on the form you are in, depends the ability you get. The day ability, which is Rage, enrages enemies based on where the cursor is. Enemies around the cast point become more vulnerable to damage, which also make them faster. Both of these are affected by ability strength. So if I take some shots at this guy, it does 50 with no crit. And if I make him more vulnerable, I'm now doing 75. And of course this is unmodded. Moving on to the Rest, which is the night ability, puts enemies to sleep based on where the cursor is. Enemies around the cast point will be put to sleep for a set duration. If they take 50% of their health as damage, they wake up. This threshold is not affected by mods. Duration and range are affected by, of course, duration and range respectively. So if I come over here and put something to sleep, as you can see, yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. The enemies around the initial cast point are the ones that get put to sleep. And if I spawn some slightly weaker enemies, once they take half of their health of damage, they wake up. Keep in mind, for Helminth, Rest and Rage is actually her subsumed ability, so this can be put on other frames. Moving on to her third, Pacify and Provoke. In night form, reduces damage inflicted by nearby enemies. In day form, increases ability strength of nearby allies. So again, two abilities in one. Provoke is the day ability, which emits an aura that grants Equinox and allies within range additional strength, which is affected by strength. It drains energy based on abilities being cast by your allies, which is affected by efficiency. The strength given to other frames stacks additively. So you push to activate, and it stays active until you no longer have the sufficient energy to sustain another buff to an ability. Having this active when using Metamorphosis actually makes the bonuses higher when making the switch, so you'll get more armor and shields. So the night form of this ability is Pacify, and it works very differently from the day one. It makes an aura that makes enemies do less damage within it, but drains you for every enemy within the area. The drain is affected by efficiency only, and the damage they do is reduced by having more strength. This version of the ability actually has fall off the further away an enemy is in the aura. So if I have an enemy next to me, they will receive the full damage reduction, while the enemy furthest away receives the least. So range is definitely important for this version of the ability. Something to note is even though this is a channeled ability, you can still receive energy from sources like Energy Siphon, Energizing Dash, Zenuric, Energy Pads, etc. So for the fourth ability, Mend and Maim, in night form, ally shields are replenished with each nearby enemy killed. In day form, enemies are inflicted with bleed status effect. Deactivate while in night form to restore health and shields for Equinox and allies. Deactivate while in day form to cast a wave of slashing force. The deactivate part of the ability isn't explained well at all, and I'll get to that shortly, but first, the basics. So the day ability is of course Maim, and when cast, it causes a bunch of slash procs and stuns on enemies. The damage is pretty low and affected by ability strength, but the good part of the ability comes with how you can store damage from the kills, which can then be let out in a burst to enemies in range of the aura. Bear in mind that strength doesn't affect the actual burst damage, and the damage diminishes with range to the target. Additionally, the slash procs don't stack, so you'll have to recast if you want to get another slash proc on the same enemy. So for the night part of the ability, while active, kills made within the aura give shields to allies. The kills do not need to be made by Equinox, which really helps her as a support role. Shields per kill is affected by strength. The deactivate portion of this ability is scaled by the damage stored from kills, which can be let out into a burst to allies in range, which can replenish shields and health. It prioritizes health first, and once the health is full, the remaining stored healing goes to shields. Allies affected include, but are not limited to, Eidolon lures, pets, arbitration defense targets, hostages, etc. Moving on to the augments, the first one we have is Duality, Metamorphosis Augment. Equinox's other half breaks free for 10 seconds, dealing 300% damage. So, if you equip, this is affected by ability duration, by the way. If you are to just, cast this next to some enemies, you will see that it does a lot of damage. Yeah. There's really not much to say about it. It's a pretty good augment. I just don't personally use it in much myself. Moving on to the second augment, Common Frenzy, Rest and Rage augment. Killing an affected enemy causes the effect to spread to enemies within 5 meters for 100% of the remaining duration. So, of course, this augment is affected by mods in the same manner that the ability itself is. So range and, duration and all that fun stuff. So if we just apply that ability to somebody, as you can see, it spreads very nicely. Personally, I don't have much reason to use this augment, but it is a thing, and you could use it on like sleep builds or builds that are just meant to weaken enemies. Third augment is Peaceful Provocation, Pacify and Provoke augment. Pacify converts damage done to allies into an aura that slows enemies by 40%. Provoke converts damage done to enemies into 15% extra ability strength. The slow and extra strength given is affected by strength. The maximum slow and combined strength you can achieve is 80%. If I just spawn some enemies and activate this, as you can see, the more damage I take, the more the slow goes up. I also take a lot of damage because, well, frankly, it takes a lot to convert. So obviously if that goes up to a max of 80%, it's gonna take a little while to get to that point where you can, actually have a full slow. And you have to understand that it has a pretty big drain. So you have to be able to sustain this ability if you want to use it effectively. So for the day version of this augment, you just press 3, you get your strength as usual. However, the difference is when you start getting kills and do damage, it's actually just off of damage, and ally damage also works as well. It goes up to it gives you extra basically, and that is really good. You can get that pretty quickly, and that extra strength definitely does a lot. This is a really good augment. Moving on to her fourth augment, Energy Transfer Meta-Maim augment. 100% of its charge is conserved when switching between forms. So if I have some enemies out and I was like, oh, well, I probably need to heal, and then I get a kill, as you can see, I have a bit of a stack, and I'm like, well, crap, I actually want to turn this into damage, so I am able to switch, and that damage is still there. So now if I release this, it'll do said damage. It didn't really do much, of course, so bad example, but you get the point. It's super simple augment. It's not complicated at all. Honestly, in my opinion, this isn't really needed. Like, I could see it used if you're using duality or something, which forces you to switch all the time. but in my opinion, most builds are pretty one-sided in terms of the form that gets used, so it feels more like a gimmick to me. At this point in the video, I like to answer the question, is this frame Steel Path viable? Can it run arbitrations? Is it part of the Eidolon hunts? Probably not great for Eidolons, but Equinox can be a really good support and buff for the team. Being able to replenish shields from anybody getting kills in the area of your 4th ability means you and your team always have the shield gate up, which means you won't be going down anytime soon unless you're not killing things. Support is always a great option in Warframe. Dayform is also able to kill things pretty well after accumulating enough damage, which can result in a room being absolutely deleted of enemies. Okay, so the first build we are going to go over is a support build. This build is designed to be a support for various missions like survivals, defenses, etc. If you're able to stay stationary in a mission for more than 20 seconds at a time, this is a super good option. This is usually my go-to for Steel Path. In terms of Helminth, you're going to need Dispensary for this build. Unfortunately, this is not optional, so if you don't have access to Helminth, consider trying to get it. You can replace her second ability as it's not used much anyway, but optionally, if you have no intentions of switching between forms in a mission, you can get rid of her first ability, as emissive color determines the form you spawn in as. In terms of format, you're looking at 3 former for this one. You'll add 2 Naramins and a Zenuric, and one of these needs to replace the default Vazarin. Moving on to the mod choice, starting with Aura, I have Corrosive Projection. This is a no-brainer when it comes to armored targets. However, if you want something else, you can put like an Aura Former here or whatever, which would put you up to 4 Formas. Moving on to the regular mods, we have Equilibrium to start. This build revolves around Equilibrium. Your low efficiency is basically fixed by having Equilibrium. Of course, her Dispensary is... These two just work hand in hand. You're getting so much extra energy from health orbs from this that it just works. Next mod, we have Overextended. We do need range for our 3 and 4 for them to be effective at all. And of course, this brings down our strength a bit. Sucks a little, but it is what it is. Peaceful Provocation. This is what gives you so much extra more support potential. Being able to slow enemies down around you basically means you're like a Nova. It is incredibly good for missions that warrant it. I wouldn't really use this when you're trying to speedrun a mission, but if you're going against, targets that could potentially one-shot you, slowing them down to this capacity is great. You can get up to an 80% slow with this. It is incredible. Well, almost an 80%. We're missing just enough strength to get to that, but we actually have a way to get that extra strength from external sources, which I'll get into later. Moving on to Prime Continuity. This is obvious. Just use regular continuity if you don't have primed. This is really just to keep our drain per second down a bit. As you can see, if I remove this, the drain per second goes up. Moving on to the next is Blind Rage. So ability strength. This is your bread and butter. You need as much of this as you can possibly get. Of course, it brings down our efficiency, but again, we have Equilibrium and Dispensary as a band-aid. Moving on to the next mod, we have Umbral Intensify. This is just more strength, which is paired very well with the other Umbral mod, Vitality. Her armor isn't really that great. We're not going to be using Fiber on here. Flow, look, we blow through energy. We want to have as big of a maximum as we can possibly get. In terms of Arcanes, I would recommend Guardian and Grace, but you can replace Grace with something like Energize if you're having energy issues. This is probably going to happen if you're still relatively new to the build. You need to keep 100% uptime on Dispensary. If you're not doing that, Energize is a pretty good band-aid for that. Just remember you won't be getting healed as much with Grace. Alternatively, you can use things that buff weapon damage and stuff if you don't need the tankiness, and you don't need the extra energy. You could get some Arcanes to buff damage. Missed requirements. Optionally, you can use a kit gun with Pax Bolt on it. This gives you more efficiency and strength if you get a headshot between abilities. Since you'll have your 3 up all the time, you just get your headshot kill and activate your 3, and it'll be a bit more efficient. You can also do this with your 4th and even Dispensary if you're able to keep this up properly. So Pax Bolt, of course, gives you, on a headshot kill, 100% chance to give 30% ability efficiency and strength with the next ability used within 4 seconds, which is very, very easy to maintain. This kit gun is a secondary using Gaze, Splat, and Haymaker parts. This is the build for it and does incredibly good in Steel Path. Just replace the Prime mods with the non-Prime mods if you can't do it, but I would say the Galvanized mods are not an option here. Additionally, you'll need a companion with Synth Fiber. This will allow you to pick up health even if you're at max health, which means you'll always be getting extra energy. This is absolutely you need this. You cannot go without this, because if you don't have this, you're not getting your energy conversion from equilibrium whenever you get a health pickup. And that is actually where most of your energy comes from in this build, is from health pickups. It is super important. Shit's not optional. Personally, I use Death Cube. You can use whatever. The synth fiber mod works on any companions, but I use Death Cube so I can get extra energy orbs, which just it does even more. I need all the sustain that I can get. For Operator School, I recommend Zenuric, since you can give yourself energy even while your 3 is active. However, when your 4 is active, you can't. So it all depends really how you're going to be playing, but it does help. If you don't have energy issues, you can run Vazarin, as it can do a lot of extra support things like shielding a target, instant revives, and even make things invulnerable for a short time. It's incredibly good. So for a quick how to use, I just want to mention that for lower level missions, it may be better to use day when you want to buff damage for your team, as well as help nuke things. If you want to keep things alive, use night form. So of course, when you get in, you would use, let me actually reset my energy just so it's a bit more of a fair comparison of what it's going to be like when you get into a mission. So when I get in, I'm going to press dispensary, and I prefer to be in night form for the most part with this. And then as soon as you get that first burst of energy, you press 3. You want to start getting your slow as fast as possible. Of course, if you're running day, you want to get your strength up as fast as possible, so you run that instead. You need to camp your dispensary for the remainder of the mission. This is a very stationary build, however, it's incredibly good support. Unfortunately, it's not as good as something like a Trinity because she can move around, but it's still really good. Dispensary also doubles for your allies, since you can give them things like energy and health as well. You can press your 4, and whenever you need to have an oh shit button, you can deactivate it, and it'll give your team health and shields. Having this active alone will allow you to gain shields whenever you kill something. So if I just mow down a bunch of enemies really quick, as you can see, I am just stacking shields. When you start getting a lot of kills, of course, this adds up pretty quickly. And that goes to everybody. The only difference is if you're using your kit gun for Pax Bolt, which I highly recommend. It is very good. You obviously want to get your headshot first, and then press 3, get another headshot, press 4, and you're pretty much good to go. And if you really wanted to make dispensary cheaper, you could, get your headshots between dispensary, and that will definitely help your sustain. As you can see, the sustain doesn't really go down much. When there's more enemies, you'll be drained a lot more, so just be careful. Now that I've explained a bit how this works, I'm going to go into some gameplay on how I actually use this. So I get into the mission, I throw down my 2, get any excess energy from any sources that I can, like Zenuric and stuff, and then I try to get my headshot kill. I messed up this first one, but I did get the second one, and then I press 3. This will make sure I'm getting my extra efficiency and strength on that ability. And of course, I'm blowing myself to hell here. And eventually, I will go for the 4th ability, and I'll again get another headshot kill, like so. And then I press 4, and now when I kill things, I just get a ton of shields and even overshields. And this is just me getting kills, and I'm getting this many overshields. So if I obviously had other people in the group killing things, it would be even more. So I move over to when the Acolyte comes out, and I was having trouble killing enemies. I'm a potato, apparently. So he comes out, and you'll notice that he's actually being slowed. So as I mentioned earlier, it takes time to get that 80% slow. But once you're at it, it's like nothing can even touch you, including him. I mean, unfortunately, I got Violence, who cancels your abilities, but as you can see, he's going incredibly slow. He is having a really hard time getting around, and now he canceled me, but it is what it is. And I kind of show my rotation again, how I'm, even though I've been completely canceled, I'm showing how I just, can stay alive and just start getting my buffs back. So this next clip that I'm going to show is actually me in a quick arbitration defense, just to demonstrate the fact that I can actually heal operatives with my 4, which is incredibly good. And that's pretty much all there is to this build. It's definitely one of my favorites. The next build I'll be going over is a casual nuker build. This build is designed to quickly be able to kill enemies from afar with ease as you go through a mission. There are plenty of better options with other frames, but in case someone wants to try this out, I'll leave it here and show some gameplay of it soon. In terms of Helminth, you'll want Thermal Sunder somewhere in your kit. Of course, if you want to go super casual because you don't have Helminth, you can rely on just your force/procs to do the heavy lifting and burst whenever you have enough damage, but I highly advise getting Thermal Sunder to fill the void. In terms of Forma, you're looking at 3 Forma. You'll want 2 Naramins, one of which will replace a default Vazarin, and a Zenuric on the Exilis. In terms of mods, starting with the Aura, we have Corrosive Projection. This is, a no-brainer. If you're going against armor, this is going to be your best bet. Alternatively, you can add another Forma here if you would prefer something else. I would definitely recommend an Aura Forma, though, if you want to use any of my other builds. So starting this one off with a bunch of efficiency. The duration on this build doesn't particularly matter. The only real thing that this brings down is your drain per second, but we're already getting that right back by having extra efficiency. We want to basically be able to spam our Thermal Sunder and just, keep our 4 active for a long time, and it also helps for Pacify and Provoke because obviously we're draining energy every time we use an ability and every time an ally uses an ability too, because we're buffing them too. It's really nice. Overextended, so we can just increase our range as much as possible. And of course, this brings down our strength a little bit, but this doesn't really matter too much. Next, we have Peaceful Provocation. This is obvious. This isn't totally necessary. You can use something else here if you really wanted to. I just like to have the extra strength. Next, we have Prime Continuity, just to counterbalance some of the negatives from Fleeting Expertise, because so that's 2.07 a second with Prime Continuity, and then it's 6.13 without it. So, of course, we want to counterbalance some of that so we're not getting drained super bad. Then we have Transient Fortitude, which, of course, brings our duration down again, but it gives us back some much-needed strength, as well as Umbra Intensify, which brings up our strength even more, trying to counterbalance all that overextended negative strength. Then we have Prime Flow, so we can bank a ton of energy. And then we have Stretch for even more range. Now, the reason why we want to bank a ton of energy is because in our Exilis, we have something called Preparation. This is an arbitration mod. This thing does absolute wonders for quick missions. You just spawn in with full energy. It's pretty good. Moving on to Arcanes. Arcanes don't really matter too much for this one, as you'll usually have enough energy with Preparation to get through a mission. But I would say Energize is a really good one. And if you compare it with Guardian, it'll make you a bit harder to kill since we aren't using vitality here. Going into the Operator School, Zenuric is technically what I would use, but this doesn't really matter as you're channeling most of the time anyway, so you won't be able to get energy back from energizing Dash. But, in case, you completely run out of energy, I guess, in a mission, because it's taking longer than expected, at least you'll have something to fall back on. You'll still be able to get some of your energy back to get going again. So a quick how to use this one is super simple. This one's predominantly in day form. Basically what we want to do is we want to have our 4 active at all times, and you also want to have your 3 active. So like right as you get in, press 3. This is super important. And as you damage enemies, of course your 4 will damage things on its own. So if things are super low level, they'll just die from this. If things are higher level, you're going to want to use Thermal Sunder, and just basically you're just doing a Thermal Sunder spam. That's literally all it is. It has a pretty good range, stuff like that, and when, of course, it'll continue damaging enemies in the area, but that's not the important part here. What I'm trying to demonstrate is if I now press 4, it'll finish nuking quite a bit of the enemies. Of course, the ones that were further away didn't really die. But as you can see, that is not bad. For level 60s, it'll get you through most of the content in the game. So now I'm going to show some gameplay. I was running some fissures earlier with this build, and it does pretty well. So the first thing you want to do when you get in is, of course, switch to day form, unlike what I did. And then you're going to press 3 and 4, and then you're just going to start spamming 2, assuming you're using Helminth. If you're not using Helminth, you're going to have to rely on your teammates to kill a few things to be able to use your burst damage, or you can use an explosive weapon to start getting that up a bit. But of course, you can be self-sufficient while using Thermal Thunder. So as you can see, in the top right, we have 59% extra strength, and that does really good. It pretty much band-aids whatever strength we are missing in the actual build. We're getting it right back when we're actually in a mission. And you can nuke enemies with your 4 once you've saved up enough damage. You know, it just kind of saves you a little bit of energy. And that's really, I mean, all there is to it. This build is incredibly simple. I mean, it gives your friends a bit of extra strength as well, which definitely helps, and that's really all there is to it. Okay, moving on to the next build, we have a Sleep Equinox. Basically, this makes things go to sleep. It's that simple. In terms of helmet, you don't really need helmet for this one, but I decided to put lull here for more sleeping. You can probably come up with something a bit more creative. In terms of forma, you're looking at 2 forma. You'll add 2 Naramin, and one of those will replace the default Vazarin. Moving into the mods, we have enemy radar for our aura. This is a no-brainer. You want to know where the enemies are that are actually moving around, because if they're moving around, that means they aren't sleeping now, are they? And that is the point of this build. Put things to sleep. Moving on to our first mod, we have Prime Flow. Obviously, we just want to bank a ton of energy. When nothing is happening, you can be gaining energy with Zenuric, so obviously you will be doing that. Overextended, we don't need strength on this build, but we do need as much range as we can get. Rest and Rage doesn't particularly have the best range in the game, so that's a thing. This mod slot is completely optional. I put Endless Lullaby here if you wanted to. If you didn't have Helmet, honestly, you could just use Calm and Frenzy. Every time something dies, it'll basically recast that for you for whatever duration is left, and it's definitely not bad. Moving on to the next mod, Augur Reach. This is just literally to give us a bit more range. We want to get as much as possible. Prime Continuity. You can use regular continuity if you want. Obviously, you'll just be having to hit 2 a little bit more often. We just want the duration so they stay asleep for longer. Streamline. We can't use something like Fleeting here because we want things to stay asleep longer. We don't really need to be spamming this ability that much anyway. Zenuric definitely keeps up with it. Next one, we have Constitution, just pushing our duration a little bit further. In the event that we get knocked down, at least we recover a little bit quicker. Stretch for the last slot, just to get more range. Vigilante Pursuit, for the same reason we have Enemy Radar. We want as much map awareness as we can get. We want to know when things need to be put to sleep. In terms of Arcanes, Energize is a no-brainer. Anything beyond that is pretty much a bonus. It really doesn't matter what else you run. In terms of misc requirements, just run something that can kill, preferably. Operator School, Zenuric, we need to be getting some energy from sources in case we aren't able to kill, because technically in some situations when you're using a crowd control build like this, you actually don't need to be doing killing. So, a quick how to use. I mean, really, it's you just go into Night Form and press 2. I mean, it does not get simpler than this. You now have so much crowd control potential. It's that easy. So let's go into some gameplay really quick of it actually being used in practice. So for this one, I am just going into a Steel Path Interception just to show that you can pretty much cheese these. This is pretty much one of the only uses as outside of actually, stealth leveling. So you get in and you cap 1, and then you just put everything to sleep that tries to go and get that one back. Once you're satisfied and it's not really getting capped that much anymore, you go and cap the next interception point, and then you just pretty much rinse repeat. While you're in the process of capturing all these, you're putting the guys in the middle to sleep, because that's literally the only thing that they're ever gonna go for is that middle point. Sometimes they'll go off to one of the side points, but it is what it is. And that's literally just the rest of the mission, is you sitting in the middle and putting everything back to sleep. That's it. The next best use case for this, I would say, is for leveling weapons very quickly in a stealth farm. So I just run Adaro on Sedna and put everything to sleep. With an unranked weapon, I just start to kill everything. Because you get a 500% multiplier on XP gains once you've killed 5 enemies in a row without being detected. You start getting that multiplier, and you just start leveling up incredibly fast. I would say I leveled this weapon, I believe it was like 4.5 minutes. It was super, super quick. And I mean that's really all this is. You're just putting things to sleep, giving yourself Sonuric, killing enemies. I recommend using a mod that suppresses your weapon. Things like Hush, Silent Battery, and Suppress are all the mods that you need to worry about for this. So I'm going to skip ahead real quick, and as you can see, I show the time, and that took 4.5 minutes. That's it. So this is definitely really good for leveling. Moving on to the next build. Moving on to the last build. So this is a Elite Sanctuary Onslaught, Nuke, and Buff build. This build is designed to replace Rhino in an Elite Sanctuary Onslaught run. I've seen this build do better than Rhino's at 180% roar. Basically, you have your own roar as well as your third ability, which gives extra strength, and your roar gives damage. For Helminth, of course, you'll need roar because you'll be replacing the Rhino buff in your optimized group. In terms of Forma, you're looking at 3 Forma. You'll add 2 Nariman, and one of those will replace the default Vazarin. Additionally, you'll add a Xenuric to the Exilis. In terms of mods, Corrosive Projection. You're going to be in Elite Sanctuary Onslaught. There is no reason to run anything other than Corrosive Projection. Your entire team should be running this. Moving on to mods, Prime Flow, so we can bank a ton of energy. You'll have a Trin in the area, so the lower efficiency definitely really doesn't hurt that much. And you'll always have some to fall back on when enemies get tight for Trin. Overextended to give us a bunch of range. The negative strength doesn't really matter too much here. It's not that much of a problem. Peaceful Provocation, of course, so we can give even more strength to our team. We're going to be in the day form pretty much the entire time. Transient Fortitude, so we can buff ability strength. We don't really need the duration that much on this, so of course we're doing that. Blind Rage, we don't need efficiency because we're going to have a Trin, so we just want to stack as much strength as we can. Streamline, this is pretty much an option slot. Technically, you don't need this, put whatever you want here. Stretch, this is definitely not optional. You want as much range as you can get, and Umbrella Intensify to bring your strength up even further. Power Drift in the Exilis will obviously bring up your strength even further, and that's pretty much how that build goes. In terms of Arcanes, I recommend Arcane Guardian to help keep yourself alive. Anything else is really just a bonus. Misc requirements, preferably anything with focus lenses on it, so you can earn lots of focus. In terms of Operator School, you'll get your energy from the Trinity in the group, so I would say Vazarin is the best way to go here, as you'll be able to revive teammates instantly so they don't lose focus gains if they go down right as they come through a portal. So, a quick how to use, as soon as you get into a new round, press 3 and use Roar. Once you have enough energy to sustain your third ability easily, press 4 to start stacking your damage, and release it to clean up leftover enemies. Keep your Roar up at all times for your team, as you are the buff for the group. Of course, all of this needs to be done in day form. So, I just grabbed some quick footage with some friends. I didn't even go in with an optimized group. But basically, you get in, you press 3, and I was supposed to press 2 as well, but, it is what it is. I messed up my order. But I told you what it is, don't make the same mistake as me. And then you press your 4, and you stack some damage. So basically, you just try to time this with the nuke in the room. So as you can see, many things died, and then I just clean everything up. You can see on the map what's happening, so as you can see, everything is dying 2 volts 4, and then I just clean everything up on the map. That's literally all it is. I'm not keeping my 2 up because I'm a freaking idiot, but it's a really, really easy roll. And in a second here, I'm gonna nuke everything pretty much in the map. And there it is. So as you can see, it's pretty good as a nuke. And the buff is literally better than Rhino, I would say, so it's definitely worth using. So that is the complete Equinox guide. Equinox is definitely a super good option. If you enjoyed the video, or it helped in any way, please leave a like, and if you're looking forward to future content like this, subscribe and stay tuned. If I missed anything, or you'd like to leave some feedback, leave it down in the comments. I appreciate all the support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.